Okay, so we are live, and I have the huge pleasure today to have Coldie and John Van Hammersfield. Hey, how are you?
Good.
Doing great. Thank you.
Co-hosting with Sam from AsyncArt. We've had, 10 minutes of pre-live conversation, and we had a bit of a chance to dig a bit into, John's like background and obviously, the introduction to crypto art. But I just want to take it like back and, start with, I guess, like first of all, like introductions, and then we can maybe Coldie, like you can start and just talk a little bit about how this collab kind of started, and all of that. So John, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm John Van Hammersveld, the artist, graphic designer, and photographer. I taught at CalArts for like 7 years.
Super.
But I've been working for like 60 years as a graphic designer, an artist, and a photographer, having many shows and write-ups and all that.
And John, before we move on to me, John, can you just, for people who aren't aware of just some of the projects you've done that are, like some of the album covers, can you just, or some of the poster work, if you could just take a minute and just kind of give people
All right. So when I was 23, I designed the Endless Summer poster, which became huge in 1966. And gave me a New York reputation, and I was like 25, something like that by that time. Then I got a job at Capitol Records as an art director there for the CRDC with Brown Meggs, who basically signed the Beatles to the label. And one day I did a Magical Mystery Tour album cover and campaign. So learning about the music business, going from art school to learning about the art business or Hollywood and how it all works and everything, I opened with through partners a concert venue, and it ran for like about a year, and there was 43 groups that came in from all over the world: the Grateful Dead, the Who, Spencer Davis, all the. It was an amazing year. And so out of that, I met every manager you wanted to know. And so I went into packaging album covers, and that went on for like 17 years. And then as the Square basically disappeared and turned into a digital medium, I then went back into the surf business with the Endless Summer and Jimmy Z and Gotcha and Quicksilver and all those companies for about 10 years or so. And then Chris Blackwell hired me to redesign the Fatburger chain. So he wanted a pop culture look to it, and so I became the architect and the designer of media. So that went on for like 5 years. And then and that broke into being a design consultant for all these different businesses, and then 2000 came along, and I opened another studio, and it was digital, and I did movies, and my own work. So I started drawing, and I hadn't drawn for a long time, and so the drawings are basically what holds my work together. But also the electronic media, being that a drawing can be broken down into vector and be separated. So then that became really digital. And so I can make movies and all kinds of different graphic design. So the wave that you have is this many layers of one drawing broken down into vector colors. So I have a mural that's 510 feet by 30 in El Segundo, called what do you call it? It's the tank. So it's an amazing object there in this oil field of pipes and canisters and all that. So as you go into the town of El Segundo, it used to be this rusted thing, and so now there's this beautiful kind of like a flower there, and everybody's like excited about it. And then in the 80s, I did an Olympic mural, 360 feet, and a poster, all that for the 84 Olympics. I don't know, is that enough? Yeah.
I think, I think that lays a good groundwork. Yeah, for sure.
Love that.
No big deal.
Yeah, exactly. Just just your standard history, right? History timeline.
Yeah.
I mean, Coldie,
no one would hire me. I was just too out there.
That's how you should be, man. I think
the corporations were conservative, and so my studio was wild. And so all the wild people came to my studio, not the conservative people. So, and I benefited from it.
That's an inspiration. I think that's something, there's a saying that I like to say is let your freak flag fly. And, it's just being yourself and being as crazy and wild as you want to be. And I think that's, you're the antithesis of this. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, we were just talking before at how amazing it is to have, somebody with such a huge kind of, history in the arts and a huge background in any, in the creative community come into, a space which is still very new when it comes to art in itself and such an innovative kind of space. And I think it's unique to have you both, here to actually talk about it and talk about how,
within the career, I've had these big exhibits, over the decades of the work. I just finished one in 2019 at the Westmoreland Museum of American Art. It was like a huge show, and I got all these people coming in looking at color. They never saw color quite done that way in a popular culture kind of way. They were always plugged into a different kind of drab grayish world. So I mean, this last year being sort of subjugated to just sticking to the studio was good in a way, because I started developing books. So I have 8 books that I've been able to marshal on the computer and put it all together. So now I'll go I'll do a big publishing bout for about a year or two.
Nice.
Analog.
Coldie,
But
do you want? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, analog. Analog the book, something that people can hold on to rather than the swift moving internet where everything is just a little touch and it's gone. To hold the work rather than just abbreviate it.
I hold dear my my set of art books. I moved these books. I lived in LA for 10 years, and I moved once every year. And no one got evicted. It wasn't anything weird. It's just like a friend went to school or someone moved, and I was always just finding a new place. And I would lug these books around to every single apartment, every single place. And I could tell you, I could pick one out that I probably moved for 10 years and never looked at it, right? But then there's that one time and that one reason that I needed to look at that book. And it was there for me, right? And I got 50 more books I probably haven't even looked at. But I'm going to keep moving them, because it's like that treasure trove of like John is saying, that tactileness where you're actually grounding yourself in media. You can flip a page, you can get into the flow of a book, and then you can uncover these gems that wouldn't have mattered to you 10 years before, but there they are right now.
And the stories which you can never put on the air. I mean, it's.
Yep. Yeah. I'm always a nut for those. I went to a Rauschenberg retrospective, and they had a big fat Rauschenberg book.
Yeah,
and
big book. Yeah.
Had to get that one. I'm a geek for those art store books.
Yeah.
I actually have books that I carry around. I'm exactly the same as you, Coldie. I've been moving in London almost every year since I've been here, and I'm exactly the same. I always have, the same kind of books. And I do actually, sometimes you just open it up and it's like, yeah, I actually wanted to read exactly this at this moment. So I'm glad I brought them with me every year.
We moved our studio to San Pedro into the Williams bookstore, and it had Williams bookstore on the marquee in the front, like in a neon sort of thing. We left it there, and then we split the gallery into a workspace for my work as an artist. But then we opened a bookstore there, and people would come to look at the books, and Alita was so delighted with having these really young people who are like 6 or 9 or 10 years old, would come in, and she would be able to hand a certain kind of book to them, and that would be their whole kind of life. And the mother would buy it and take it home, and good God knows what's happened to that child, but well, it was influenced by that book.
That's very true. And Coldie, so you were mentioning before about how you and John met. So do you want to, just talk a bit about how that happened?
Yeah. It's another synchronicity moment, right? So I lived in LA for 10 years, like I was saying. In that time, I went to school, and through that, I got a job at LA Weekly, being the lead designer, doing the covers, working at the newspaper, which is a high turnaround type of job, right? A story would change right before it went to press. This was back when things were printed still. Yeah. And they would come to me at like 6 o'clock, and it's on the press at like 11 or something. And the publisher would come to me. They're like, Ryan, a story changed. Like, oh shit, like this thing happened. Here's a blurry JPEG and a headline. Go. And I'm like, okay. I was 24, right? Fresh out of school. Probably the most fun job of my life, and I didn't even know it because I was in it, right? I was just a kid. Yeah. And I would be cranking. I would crank it, and you just like John, you just kind of like black out for a couple hours, and like you wake up the next morning, and the weird thing was I would finish the thing at 11 o'clock, right? And it would go to press. I'd have anxiety all night because I was sure that there were typos. I didn't separate the colors correctly. Something, the fonts wouldn't outline. Like I was a wreck, right? And I'd go to bed, wake up, run to the newsstand, and none of those problems happened. It was always fine. But that was kind of my introduction to design, right? Wow. So while I was there, my boss was Shelley Leopold, and we were just great collaborators. We were just kicking butt, week after week, we would just be in the flow. And after I left there, we stayed in contact, still one of my best friends. Love chatting with her all the time. And during this time after LA Weekly, she joined a cat nonprofit, cat charity called Kitty Bungalow. And what Kitty Bungalow was doing was physical art shows where artists would donate cat-themed art. And they would have a little pop-up show, for the weekend, and patrons of the the hospital or just art connoisseurs. I had a little name to it because big name people that Shelley knew and were in the community would donate these pieces of art, right? So she asked me if I would be into doing one, and I mean that was a challenge. Like, come up with a cat-themed piece of art. I was like, wow, okay, like let's go for it. So I did a couple different lenticular 3D art prints, and it was super fun, and they sold, so I felt good. I got to help some cats in need. And after, let's see. So the second time, I told her, I was like, so I'm in this kind of weird place called crypto art, and I know a lot of people who kind of love cats, including Crypto Kitties. There's another artist, Crypto Kaiju, who does some cat-themed art. I said, let me ask. Worst case, they can say no. We rallied. Like, Crypto Kitties, Kaiju, myself, and there might have been others. We raised all this money for them, and they're like, well, who are you crypto people? Like, what's going on? And I said, we're great people. Like, we're philanthropic. We love to help people. Especially, I mean, I love helping people that can't help themselves, like a cat or an animal. I mean, geez, if I was a sickly cat and needed help, and some like otherworldly thing like dropped a fix for me, that's like a miracle, right? So in a little way, I just love helping cats. So fast forward, Shelly asked me if I'd be interested in doing a virtual world version, because I told her I was buying these silly virtual world plots of land and they were empty, and why not do something with them? And we said, yeah, let's do it. They had no goals in mind about what they wanted to do. And so I set up a show, and part of it was John had done these cat murals that he can talk about. But what we ended up doing was taking those murals and putting them along one of the big long walls. And I had collectors, like, people, it was like a good seed planting. They're like, who is making these awesome murals? Like, what's going on here, right? So I got to like, kind of, that was like maybe the red pill for John to be like, ooh, getting a little soak into crypto land. And after that, again, Shelly brought them back together, and we did the async piece for the show. The first one, what was it called? The Next Wave?
The Big Wave.
The Big Wave, yeah. So we did the Big Wave, and now, I mean, John has hopped in like fully, and he's coming to me with these like awesome, wild ideas. So these are the beginning steps of some awesome new things that are in the works. So yeah, John, if you want to tell people about that the epicness of that cat mural.
Yeah. So I was in Las Vegas, doing the Fremont Experience, which is and the old Main Street is like 1,500 feet long, and the architect put a canopy over the top of it, 1,500 feet long, and then it's 100 feet wide, and it kind of like in a dome, and that's hooked to a computer. So I made a movie that was 7 minutes long, and part of the movie was I did the first section, and then in the second section I tried this. I took these cats and put it in with the story, and so I had like out of that project. I had 10 or 12 different cats, So then we came up with this. Lead and I came up with a theme to do a mural on the backside of our studio in San Pedro, and then it was rejected. And then downtown, Brookfield, the company that owns 3 or 4 big, huge buildings that they rent. They do these art projects, and so all of a sudden, the cats ended up being a 230-foot mural, 12 feet high. But then the really great part of it is that the first one I ever did on the back of the building of the studio was very simple. But then when I did this long one, I was able to look at it as more complex. And so I came up with a whole bunch of different vernacular than the other ones. And so the cats became these incredible characters in a way, in different colors and different patterns with other patterns connected to it. So it was a big hit. It was up for about a year or something like that while they were doing a building there, cleaning up a building.
John, are there any photos of this that we can pull up? If we Google John Van Hammersveld cats, will we find it?
I would imagine if you put in alley cats or I guess John Van Hammersveld murals, and you may find some. I mean, there's a lot of murals. I did like 14 different murals.
Yeah, would just be cool to see sort of like the.
Ooh, maybe I have them.
Do you have it?
No, I don't have it. I'm not.
No, maybe I found it. Let me just share my screen.
Okay.
Yes.
So
It's hunting. Oh, El Segundo. Well, that's kind of like one of them. There's a cat.
Nice. Very cool.
There's another cat.
That gives a little bit of context here.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
actually really interesting because I just want to bring the attention to our listeners and our viewers right now that John's work is very unique and very beautiful in its own right. But if we take a look at Coldie's work as well, there are definitely relationship similarities here in terms of like the styles and the genre of artwork. And I almost that is like so interesting that like you can see like these similarities. It's almost like it was meant to be that you guys connected, and something about your work is sort of like
that's vernacular.
Speaking. Yeah, totally.
And you know what I mean? The crazy thing is right. My parents grew up. We had a record collection. Like I listened to records. They're classic rock fanatics, right? So I had a lot of the culture ingrained in me from a young age, and I'm a very visual person. So I soak in visuals, right? So, growing up, all the album covers that John did, I literally were around the house, right? And at the Endless Summer poster, all these things.
About all this, yeah. I have a lot of friends that tell me that. When I was in, I had my dad showed me the Rolling Stones Exile Main Street album cover.
Yeah, yep. And that's the way that I learn. Like I learn by doing projects, and I learn by visuals or auditory, right? So I mean, music is a slam dunk, and then the visuals of the gatefold. Then I started collecting records, and I would, once you start loving what a vinyl gatefold, with the pop out and the sleeves, I'm very much entrenched in that type of design. So when I went to school for design, and was going to art shows, I was my go-to aesthetic is John's style, right? And I love Warhol, Rauschenberg. I love like Kandinsky, people that like use color and pop in these very like pleasing, but also in your face ways that you're not quite expecting. Mm-hmm. So as I was kind of forming my own style, right, kind of through the years, it's beautiful that John, in a sense, was one of those pioneers of a look that became so iconic that it starts to seep into people's minds, right, without even really knowing that that's part of the special sauce, right? So, especially with these async pieces, me and John, we had a great call where I was like, I'd love to talk to John just about the colors and what's going on. And we were talking about color theory and foreground, background, and like what colors should do at different levels. It was like talking shop with a friend, and there was an understanding that was it was just super special to kind of like get to bounce ideas off of with you, John. It was just super fun. I love geeking out with art talk.
So I just kind of want to bring attention here. Nicole, can we pull up Coldie's Choose Your Own Adventure? Because I just want to show viewers how related these artworks are and how much they're relatives of each other. It's amazing. I didn't even connect the two dots until you guys started talking. So Choose Your Own Adventure there on the right. Yeah, very much in the same related. And Coldie, would love for you to sort of talk about your thought process behind this. And also, I also just want to point out to any of the collectors that own any of the layers or any of the layers on this artwork, feel free to change them. We actually had a live stream 2 times ago where collectors were changing layers as we were sort of talking about the artwork. So if you are paying attention right now, collectors, please feel free to change a layer so that we can see sort of the differences. But yeah, Coldie, would love for you to sort of talk through this and explain your process, and also maybe show some examples here of how it kind of is related to John's work, and then we can dive into John.
Yeah, sure. So this piece came about. I started doing this kind of walkway transitory series where it was about going and making progress. And in my art, I like to tell stories, and kind of inspirational, I guess, where it's just like it shows a path and there's a process to get in that path, right? So um, to cue it up, I was meditating, just zoning out, right? And usually when I meditate, I'm no like yogi, but like I just see black and I'm happy. I'm not thinking of anything, right? That feels nice. But this literal piece popped in my head. Not this one. It's on Super Rare. It's called Welcome Home, and it popped in my head. Finished, and I had no idea what I was looking at. I was like, "What the hell just popped in my head?" Right? No drugs. No drugs. And so I'm looking at this thing, and I had to honor it. So I made it, and it was the most hard thing, a physical piece of art. I'd never made anything like that. So I made it, and it felt good to honor that vision. And then when I got with Async, it was like the biggest challenge of my life to make a piece that mattered enough to me and that would work with a bunch of layers, right? So this thing must have, geez, I don't know, 30 layers or probably more. And what I wanted to do was, the story Choose Your Own Adventure, those books, I grew up with those as a kid in the 80s and 90s, where you'd read a book, you'd get to page 4, and it would say, well, do you want to fight the dragon, or would you rather like run the other way, right? And if you fight the dragon, it'll take you on a different route. If you run, it kind of does these crisscross parallel stories. And sometimes you freaking die, and sometimes you win, and every time you read it, it's different. So that was the reason, the thought behind this one was you get to choose your own adventure, you get to choose your own reality, you get to choose all these different things. And this art was like a collective consciousness piece. So, the person in the background, if you pull up the main one again, so back there, Euphoria. So what I did was I took the psychological, the points of a investment curve, right? All the different Euphoria, you'd have to go back. There's like all the different stages. If you click on, Psyche there. So disbelief, optimism, thrill, these are all the different layer options. So the person who bought that, their reality is the sky, right? And then another person's reality is the mountain range. And then another person's reality is the billboard, right? That billboard has like 20 different sayings on it. So together, it's really interesting to see if we're all in the same vibe, right? Is everybody feeling the same thing? Or is there like a flux? Someone's feeling good in the sky, someone's feeling not so good in the billboard, so huge experiment. And, there was so many different kind of themes I was touching on without having to tell people different things I wanted to like talk about. So, it was a huge, very difficult project for me because I've never thought about live interactivity with layers. And I call this an opus piece because it was something I'd never done before. I took an extreme amount of care and time to do it right. Like I probably worked on this thing for, 4 or 5 months just to like really figure out the interactions and like with John, like how do the colors work, the walkways and the people on the road, the x-rays and the, all these different things had to work together. And actually one of the things that just resold was if you click on the one called Outlier on the second row, the colorful one. So
I saw this. Yeah.
So this was my very biggest experiment of this whole piece was when you're on the road, the person that's largest is actually just starting their journey, right? So in art, you think bigger is better or maybe like the wow piece, but in actuality, that's like the person just getting started. And if you want to go back to the main piece again, what the Outlier, there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outlier. Wonderful book.
Yes, amazing book.
I don't read books. I actually read that book, right? So to me, that's pretty important. If I could actually get through a book. If you look way deep where their cursor is, way far back there, there's one character that's way out in front of the pack. way out there, and they're tiny, 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 tiny. And that person, yep, right back there, that's the only one that can be in color, because they did their 10,000 hours. They have figured out where they're going, and they have a purpose, and they're off down far down the path, right? So to me, that one is the most important layer in this whole piece, and it's tiny, right? And my thought experiment was, will somebody value this tiny layer that has this special power that all the other ones are just grayscale options, you know? So you could pick any grayscale you want. But I was like, is someone gonna want that thing? Because to me, that's where you want to be on the road. Eventually, we all get there at different points. But this guy at this point is way out, right? And it actually resold to somebody just last week. And I had a great conversation about it. And it was, it validated that whole kind of thought of would somebody want it on the secondary market, you know? And it proved the point. And I love this thing. And now working with John on his stuff, I have a couple async little things that have been in my brain for the last year or so that, like, now I'm ready to start unleashing.
Yes.
And I won't tease those too much here, but now since I've been in the ecosystem with your layers, just a shout out to Async. Your UI and your usability is a blessing. Like, it does the things I want it to do. You know, it's not like, oh man, what's going to happen here? I can't tell what the button means. Like, you did it right. And I can say that, as a creator, it allows us to stay in the studio and not get so caught up in, oh man, is this even going to work? You know? So, I'm stoked to have done that one. Getting John running on these is awesome. And if you want to hop over to his,
I do just want to say, like, how exciting it is to hear that you're thinking about other async artworks, and really looking forward to that. And I think, you know, just as a transition point, like I said before, it's very interesting to see how you really, you know, like your work. I think the beauty and the nuggets of gold that we find in John's work are not in the big parts. They're not in the main focuses. It's all within the details, and that's the brilliant point here. And the really, really cool part about watching this sort of artwork and seeing John's work on here as well. So John, take it away. Tell us about Big Wave.
Actually, sorry,
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that I think, like, it's so, you know, what you just said, Coldie, and I think it's something so, like, unique about async is really, like, how anybody can tell their own story. Like, you know, you said choose your own adventure, and really with the layers, like, anybody is storytelling their artwork, and it's so powerful. You know, you were talking about the analogy of, like, when you choose, you know, what path to go, like, as if it was a game, and it's like the full, you know, gamification in a way of, like, artwork, and giving that power to people who are looking and admiring, not only, like, as a passive, you know, collector or viewer, but really, like, active collection of art. And I think that's that's just so powerful in so many ways. And sorry, John, take it away.
You know, the psychedelic poster of the 60s was layered, meaning there was the group, the name, and then there was always a kind of a subject matter that had something to do with San Francisco and the bands and all that. And it's very much what you're doing, you know. So I sort of graduated from that through the abstraction, through the Bauhaus, and just using design principles and color relationships, so that I could actually draw an image, and I wouldn't be tied to anything. It could be abstract, and if there was a layer, the layer had some sort of relative relationship to the larger one. So in, like, in the Big Wave, you have I guess it's like 4 different colors there. So those are 4 different sections, but the drawing is put together all as one piece, and then it's divided into the sections. So so I got, you know, so around 19 in the mid 80s, I was around surfing magazines, and they and I noticed that there was one style that people worked in, you know, it was like a cartoon of waves and stories, you know? and seascape and people drawing waves, you know. So I entered in 2000 a way of looking at waves as abstracts, but really compositions that people had never seen before that were related to the ocean. So what we're seeing is that the ocean is a narrative, you know. I mean, meaning people can draw waves actually the way they are and then slightly abstract them, but they're still seascapes. When mine are totally abstract and of a design relationship with waves. I guess that's the best way to talk about it.
Nicole, can we explore the artwork a little bit and talk about, and maybe John, you can sort of talk about the color choices and the stylistic elements that you decided to make programmable?
Well, first of all, it's the drawing. You know, the drawing is really time consuming. Each drawing takes probably you know, a couple weeks to do, and it's all very intricate. You know, when normally somebody puts one line down and that's it. And I'll work on that. Yeah, I'll work on these sections, you know, for like days and days and days. So that it's the pattern, it's a drawing pattern. I guess that's the way it is with me, and that I'm excited about. So I do portraits and different kinds of content, but it all has to do with patterns. So then the patterns then are layers that from the printing business you can put a four color piece has different layers to it. As the yellow goes down, as the blue goes down, and the red and the black, it's a layer combining a picture at the end, you know, with a photograph or whatever. So with mine, mine were built for silk screening, so you had 6 colors, 8 colors, and 9 colors. So they're not, well, they're graphic stories, I guess. They're not realities or associated with realities.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really worth mentioning here that, like, you know, it's hard. I would imagine that as an artist, it's hard to find color palettes that are going to work together in many different iterations. I mean, I assume that these have at least like over 300 different like iterations that can go together, and being able to find a color palette that's going to work in tandem with every other iteration or every other combination is pretty difficult. So it's pretty impressive that you know, even though you have these seemingly you know, differing colors, they all sort of work together. They all sort of work together to tell like a larger narrative, which is very, very interesting.
And if I could hop in super quick, so the cool thing also about the way John uses color is, so this is the first piece that sold, and the palette of this one is much different than the palette of the new one.
Yeah, super. Yes.
You know, that's its own thing. Is, you know, sometimes you'll see an artist and like they just have a palette, right? They got 4 colors, right? But you know, this one compared to the other, there's completely different emotional feeling with the way the colors are presented. This is to me, more of a subtle, like maybe vintage type of look, right? And now this one's like in your face pop, right? It's a totally different feeling when I look at the two.
Yeah, look at that, huh?
Wow, and this particular iteration that I'm looking at right now, like this so reminds me, Coldie, of your work, like with Euphoria in the background and having these dots in the background too. That's just like crazy. It's crazy. I just like, I see it so clearly. How related.
Yeah, I do murals in these layers, you know, and different kinds of color combinations. And the clouds became like a trademark. And what the clouds do is that your eye hooks to one of the clouds, and all of a sudden you see more clouds. So it gives you a perspective off of a flat plane. There's an optical illusion.
I was about to say, yeah,
so
exactly. It does give that optic illusion
so
that the clouds are coming towards you.
Yeah. So that was the most interesting part of the breakthrough in doing the murals, is being able to actually not only make a mural and have a narrative, but also have optical illusions.
That is crazy.
If you looked at it long enough, you all of a sudden became dimensional.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like a drug in a way.
Wow.
Yeah, it is.
And
actually,
so you see the device, the cloud, being really small, and the larger one in front of it. Alita came in and said, "Oh, that cloud's too big," but she wasn't seeing the dimension.
Mm.
And so, will she ever see the dimension? So that's the trick of it. Some people can see it, and some people can't.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you learn, through my work, is you learn how to see it and see the dimension in the flat work.
There's something so cool about that. And I'm a huge proponent, as a musician, I'm a huge proponent of educating audiences about how to listen and how to pay attention to nuances in music. I'm trained classically, so that especially like plays into, choral music, orchestral music. And it's just so cool to see that this is like that same concept is being applied here, where you're conditioning and you're training viewers about how to look at your art, even if they're not necessarily aware of it, subconsciously, even like you're training them and you're giving them a new perspective that they then take to other artworks and sort of apply that, even if just subconsciously. Amazing.
All right. So the fun part of the posters in the 60s was that if you didn't smoke pot, you didn't understand what the poster was, because you didn't see the dimension. So this is where the concept comes from. So without drugs, it's taking people on a psychedelic input, and if you look at it long enough, the green dots and the white dots, they start separating, and the ocean in the background, starts quivering, sort of, and then the wave starts jittering, and it's a fun thing to do, to turn the flat into a dimensional kind of illusion.
John, that kind of brings up something. You must remember back, it was probably the 90s when Magic Eye, where you would kind of cross your eyes and the 3D picture would kind of pop out.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, I'm talking like 7 or 8 years old, my grandparents had a Magic Eye poster in their house. Why? I have no idea. These people were not like, I don't know. They found it at the flea market and they threw it up. And I learned to train my eyes with stereoscopics in a way that where you can like focus in and out with your eyes, where you can cross them or bring them apart. And what I would start doing was I would do that just at the supermarket. When I would just be around, I would just start bending my eyes in and out. And it's doing those same things where you're able to get colors to separate. And you're able to also, one of the things I always like to do is I like to, like, when I'm looking at a composition, I kind of blur my eyes. I make it very fuzzy. And it's the things you're talking about with perspective. You start to see different things come out and recede just using your eyes. And I think it's a tool that a lot of people don't use to their advantage, where you can do these funny little tricks and it'll teach you new things. Like, even if people don't do drugs, right? They can just use their eyes in silly ways and learn some stuff.
Well, I stopped taking drugs, in the 60s. I stopped, in 1969, I stopped it all because it just was unhealthy and I was about to die, hanging out with the Stones and the Beatles and all these different people. So in that transition, then the drug scene, you kept seeing in the culture in one way or another. It was always there. So as we broke into the 2000s, and studying these drawings, which were just one drawing, beautifully done and everything, had an illusion to it. But then as I progressed with the murals and other work, I then decided that it was going to be in layers, and different focal points. And so here we are in these illusions. So it took like 20 years to get here.
That's amazing, John.
Yeah. And my own development. Yeah.
Go ahead, Nicole.
Actually, it's really interesting because the change and the randomization of the color and the fact that you can actually change the color of the waves makes it even like if I didn't see the title, the New Crest Wave, my eyes, so me myself, I wouldn't even necessarily think about a wave. Like I see it more as like even some sort of like flurry kind of dragon. Like it's crazy how much your eye can really like expand in imagination when you change the like normal perspective of what you're used to seeing as a wave being, blue or a lot of shades of, light blue or green. So it's really really fascinating.
John, before we sort of wrap up the New Crest and a little bit more of your artwork, I'm sure that like a lot of people are dying to like, and I know I am very intrigued by your experiences with all these like amazing artists. Do you have any interesting and cool stories to share with our listeners about like, working with the Stones or the anyone else that you've worked with?
Let's see.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here. You totally don't have to answer that question.
Well, I worked with Norman Seeff for a while, who was a photographer, and so he would give me a picture, and then I had to dream up something, an illusion for it. And so the Kiss "Hotter Than Hell," which is an album cover that everybody must have had as a child. I mean, everyone must have had one. So Norman took this picture of Kiss, which they look kind of like a Japanese costuming in a way, but you're not. But it's sort of surreal and kind of space age. You just didn't know quite what was going on. So what I did is I would go to China. I would go down to Japanese town and eat a lot there. So I started realizing I could bring that culture, into this album cover. So the design of it is very much like a toy collection from the Japanese store. And then the symbology, which is at the top, there's a logo there. I had to talk to a couple Chinese people or Japanese people about what's the strongest kanji symbol that you can put. So I put it there. So that album, as abstract as it is, but looking like a Japanese toy, people loved it. It was an amazing adventure.
Amazing.
One, the Rolling Stones was working with Robert Frank, who was an amazing photographer from the 50s, and sitting next to Jagger, and telling him he should use Frank for the cover was such a moment in a way, where Jagger sort of turned my work down, but then he took me, and my advice of Robert Frank is that he calls me back when the pictures are delivered, and so he asked me. Jagger asked me to put it all together. So I looked at it as an art print, and it was going to be really rough and everything. So I took it home and made the paste ups of the production boards of it, and then took it back, and he approved it, and then they printed it, and then it went into distribution, and people hated it, and it was like. It was the last cover I would ever do for the industry, but it turned out over the years it's his best album and best cover. Yeah.
As is the case with so many musicians and so many artists who first release works that are so controversial And so for the audience at the time, that they, you know, rebel against it, and then over the years it's like it shifts and everybody loves it and think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Jagger came to me because I have a wild studio. You know, I just do different things that are not common to the normal process. You know, so in the 300 covers that I did, it was always like that. Someone wanted a piece or a whole thing or a billboard or whatever. You know. And they would always get this wild piece of color and design and everything. So I didn't conform really with the other studios, which was to my advantage, as much as they would hire some of my assistants so they could find out what I do. That was the way. It was you know, the way I ran the studio at that time is that in the analog world, you had the end result was the printed piece, but it was all the different people that you had to go to, you know, who had to, you know, had airbrusher, and you had to have a good relationship with the guy. You went to the typographer, and you had to have a good relationship. You had to go to the people who got the stats, you know, people who would like do the stripping. So it was like 9 or 10 people you were talking to, you know, every day, until this thing would happen, or until it would be printed, you know. So it was like a 3-month process. So you got all these relationships with all these different people. So each cover was like a story in its own right as to how it was actually produced and printed. So by the time you get to 2000, you know, and the digital, you know, the digital covers this little tiny square, and that really doesn't have anything to do with anything, you know, and then it collapses into this digital world where everything is just really divorced from other people. So your relationship is only with the computer. It's not with all the people who helped you.
Totally.
You know, like Adobe Airbrush or Adobe typography. You know, you don't get to talk to anybody. You just have to, you know, dial it in, and it drops down into your system, and you get to use it. And also there's another thing that happens too in kids growing up and going to art school and going into business. Business is exploitive, meaning, you know, the person is exploited in the studio or the agency or whatever, and never is able to own his own work. You know, and is always making their work to conform, you know, to other things in the world that are common, so it's communicated properly through television and print. So all of that, you know, is just disgusting what happened. So what I always did is held on to my copyrights, but no matter what, you know, as much as the record companies took the copyright away from me. And paid me well, I lost all of my connections to that work. You know, so I can't publish anything on the Beatles or the Stones or anything like that because they own it. I don't own it. Mm. So in my progress in 2000 was to own everything I do, and so that has become a value to me. So my actual archive is really valuable. It's a little bit like, you know, Bob Dylan selling his songs for $300 million. I wonder if that'll happen to me, you know, even for 80,000 or 250,000 or whatever. We'll buy your archive. There's some stories.
That's interesting what you're just saying, because essentially is something, you know, that, like, I think crypto art is really trying to, maybe solve is a big word, but at least compromise in a way, you know, the fact that artists have never been given credit for what they're actually doing, for a lot of the artwork that they've produced, whether it's in agencies, whether it's for, you know, musicians, for other people, you know, for third parties.
Yeah. Yeah,
so
like covers, you have to hunt to find my name down there somewhere. And yet
exactly.
At this particular time, because of the internet, someone finds my name on the internet, and then they see all the different covers, then I have a relationship that way. But normally you would buy the package and you'd have to go through many different layers to find and read down, and I'd be at the end of the column. So it's an interesting time.
And that actually brings up a whole nother thing. Like you were touching on how I think a lot of this crypto art, what's being shown, what's popular right now, are artists who have been kind of forced to go into commercial art, like me being the same, right?
Yeah,
you're an artist, but you got to pay the bills. So you work for a newspaper, you work for an ad agency. And it's become such the sense that I think from my graduating class at art school, very few are still doing art, right? And even that's, if they're a lawyer or a CPA, people end up giving up on art because it's hard to make any like financials from that, which I think is a separate thing. I think people need to make art and get away from the money side, right? Make your art. And I tell that to people who I'll get on a chat with them. I'll be like, so how you doing? How's your family? How's your art? And I make a point. And sometimes I know that I'm making art. They'd be like, oh man, I've been wanting to get my paints back out. I've been wanting, and to me, that makes me really sad, right? Because that is what is in our soul, is to make art. And I think that now that crypto art is here, so many digital artists, 3D animators, these people who were relegated, and nothing against commercial work at all, but they've been doing commercial work because that was the only way that their skills could be seen and appreciated. And now it's been flipped on its head, where these artists have been putting in 20, 30 years being amazing at their craft. Now they can hop into crypto art and really own it. And that's like this new wave of art appreciation. It's digital, it's animated. And also, John, your work lies directly in that wave. And pardon the pun, but it works. It's like there's a connection that all these outsiders, right? These art outsiders are having their true day. And I'm getting chills as I say this, but it's happening in a sense that we can take the power back, and we have digital provenance, so as we sell this thing over the years, it's always going to go back to our wallet, and it's always going to be ours. And I'm honored to see all these different people who, we were all watermarking our stuff and afraid of it being right click and saved through the years because somebody could print it or own it. It doesn't matter anymore. The value's in the token, the value's in the unique ownership. And I think as these waves of new artists learn and come in, it's interesting to see what culture is digesting and what people want to consume in this new era. And I called this the Atari phase.
It's Shepard Fairey, he controls it, but then it also controls him.
Sure, 100%.
So many people knocking him off in the same style, that he probably has a hard time dealing with that. But then he's so pervasive with that style.
Yep.
Like everywhere.
Yep, 100%. And it goes all across the board. Banksy's, these things that like are proverbially easy to knock off.
Yeah,
that's a whole different conversation. It's like, make what's in your brain. Don't make what's in someone else's brain. Like, what's the creative power in that? Like, could I go make a Shepard knockoff right now? Sure. Like, would I feel very good about myself? No, not at all. I think that.
But that's been the agency. It's the agency's process. Is that one company wants to clone the other company and put more money into it to get on top. That's just who you had to work for.
Yeah. Very true.
Every day you were competing with another company. So as you withdraw from that and go to a new area, that's what I've done is withdrawing from that kind of work, and then creating my own work and people attaching themselves to my work rather than an anonymous person, as a packaging designer.
And I guess, as creatives, you also have to even build that self-confidence of saying, I don't actually have to do something that somebody else is telling me I need to do. Like, I can create out of the beauty of creating and doing art because I feel like drawing a smiley face, or drawing with excessive color, or drawing a line, like anything that you feel you want to do without anybody saying that's bad or that's good or you should be doing this along those lines. So I feel like there's a whole kind of empowering artists and creatives to do whatever. This is a blank canvas.
Yeah, in my case, in 2000, I was like going on 60 years old, and the schools were training all these people to run computers, so everything went from analog to computers with young people working on it. So I really didn't have a chance to be first in line as I was always, through the first part of my career. So I went to something that was most important to me, is that something I could do myself, which is my left hand, being able to draw, and I was always really skilled at it, but I couldn't do it because some manufacturer or corporation or art director didn't like my work. So at that point, I went into my own work, and then that's what's carried me for the last 20 years, doing my own work, doing my own drawings, and applying that to different projects, and they were all really successful, and people loved them.
And
thank you, guys.
Did you want?
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
Start. I was wondering if Coldie you wanted to touch on your Meta VS show in Crypto Voxels, and just remind everybody about that.
Yeah, thanks. So today we're calling it a block party, where so we had a Meta VS digital art experience, which was 30 parcels in Crypto Voxels that we themed with contemporary art. We featured John's async piece. We have a lot of just fantastic people that were brought together. Shelley Leopold, again, hats off. She brought in some super talented, top tier blue chip artists into this space. And, it started mid-April, or beginning of April, and it's closing. Today is the actual true closing of the show. So a lot of these auctions are ending today. And people who follow me on Twitter, I'm doing some tweet storms, and we're getting this stuff sold. There's been some great auctions going on, and super exciting. And it's kind of the culmination of a huge effort with Lady Phoenix and Shelley. The three of us put this on, and it was awesome to work with everybody, and kind of sad to see it close, right? Because we put our heart and souls into this, and we're celebrating it today. John's new piece is part of that. So again, interested collectors, go on Async, check out all the layers. There's the master and each of the layers. And, I'm just super proud of what we've done. And I thank you guys at Async for all your support and helping get the word out about this. It's been super great.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Well, we love working with
ask,
extremely talented artists like you guys. Go ahead, Nicole. Sorry.
All right.
John, have you been in Crypto Voxels?
Pardon me?
Have you been into Crypto Voxels?
I don't know what that is. Crypto, I know.
Here's your answer.
It's the virtual world.
In the virtual world where Meta VS, so the exhibition is taking place.
You have to send me a link to that.
Love that.
Take a look.
Coldie, you have to get John into Crypto Voxels. He has to
I think
see
he's
it.
been in there. I'm pretty sure that. Well, I'll get you a link in there, John.
Oh yes, right. Well, I've been in your.
Because he was talking. It was pretty funny. He sent me an email. You were very upset because there was something flying around.
Yeah.
With your art, and I was explaining that was another user, another visitor that was literally flying in front of his art piece and whatever, doing what they wanted. And I was like, we can't control that. That's somebody who's looking at
it. They're always trying to put their piece in front of yours. It's like cheating in line, trying to get to the front, to get into the discotheque or whatever.
I love that.
So yeah,
I was there. Yeah, I walked away from it and I said, gee, it's just that same artist thing, people trying to outdo each other. Trying to get first in line.
Yeah.
Because when we first on the first round with the big wave, you know, it was clean. There wasn't very much stuff in it, you know, so it was very clear. And then I go to see the crust wave, and all of a sudden I can barely see it. There's these people walking and these clouds going by. Okay, I've been there.
That's your crypto voxel experience then.
Yeah. That's my experience, the same old thing.
Well, if it makes you feel better, I'm still not, you know, 100% very manual on it. So, you know, it's not a generational thing. It's just, you know, what it is.
But that's the beauty of the fourth dimension, you know, is that you can make a, you know, environment, a room or whatever, you know, just out there in space and manipulate it. It's fantastic.
Full 360 degrees, going back to the, good. Guys, amazing. This was so illuminating and so wonderful to like talk and learn. I feel like I've learned a whole bunch of stuff and now I need to go digest it. But really, really wonderful to have you guys on here and to talk about the artwork more. It's really inspiring for me personally, just to see the process and to see sort of like the history and the relationships. So thank you guys so much for being on with us today.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's been fun chatting, and let's do it again.
Yeah, Ryan.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Coldie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk soon.
Bye.
Well, bye.
Bye.